yourself?
So I'm originally from the East Coast, so right around the Boston area, and I grew up in a very medical family. Everyone is, and I'm the black sheep of the family. I love being outdoors. I love environmental education, and it all mostly started from my high school, where I went to an agricultural high school originally, and I studied natural resources and forestry conservation, which was a lot of fun. And I learned there that I had a really strong passion and I was really good at environmental education. And this is about the same time that I got my certified interpretive guide. And so I did a whole project on the invasive purple loosestrife that attacks waterways and management practices and how to get the public very involved in that. And so from there, I went to college in upstate New York, where I studied forestry originally, and then I realized I love dealing with people a little bit more than just trees. And so I switched over to their recreation field, and I realized that I wanted to make more of an impact than just ropes course or being a nature guide, besides, so pretty much just taking people out in the field and showing them how to shoot a deer, because that's what a lot of people ended up doing up there. And so when I made this realization that I wanted to do an educator route, I started looking at colleges, and I ended up in Utah, where I now go to Utah State University, and I study recreation resource management and park administration. And throughout this experience here in Utah, I was able to volunteer with Stokes Nature Center as a environmental naturalist intern, as well as I made a whole interpretive plan that was like a 40-page document that outlined what they currently have for interpretation in their nature center, as well as improvements they can move forward. Yeah, I'm trying to think. That pretty much explains that internship.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So one of the things, can you actually give me an experience? You've got a lot of previous work experience related to interpretation. Can you give me an example or tell me about a time when you've prepared or managed volunteers to help offer programs and expand programs? Because one of the things you'll do for us is really help get our volunteers organized, both around interpretation, but also just around general stewardship of the park.
Yeah. So I think the most experience I've had with volunteers is when I was working at a career center, and I was very much helping with their career fairs. And for that, it takes a lot of hands on deck to get a career fair going.
Yeah, for sure.
And so there was only 3 paid employees, and so a lot of the positions that we had to get filled were all volunteered. So I spent quite a bit of time reaching out to students that I knew that had really good work ethic and could be dependable. And I also had, we've set up flyers asking if people wanted to volunteer. And I was constantly in the career center, so when people were coming in just for resume help or pretty much any type of help whatsoever, I would always bring it up. And so I was able to get a group of 20 students that all showed up on time, wearing the correct uniform, and we had a successful career fair with the most amount of employers we've ever seen.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Example. So another thing that, I'm sure you've had experience with this, but in every field, people deal with conflict. But we'll have conflict between guests, we'll have conflict between employees. Can you give me an example of a time in your life when you've dealt with conflict, and do you have a general philosophy that guides you in how you deal with conflict?
So the way I like to deal with conflict is putting everything on the table to have a mediator between the 2 parties. And I want to personally hear, but I want each party to hear the other person's side and how maybe a disagreement came across to the other person. Because almost all the time, it's always just a communication problem where someone might have said something that offended another person, but they didn't realize it was offensive. And so a great example of this is When I worked in retail, happened all the time with employees.
Sure.
And so I think my favorite one, though, it's always my favorite one, so I was working at Toys R Us at the time. And so this is between me and a customer once. And so I worked customer service on Christmas time at Toys R Us. And I had a customer come in, and she had to have this one doll. And this one doll was the toy of the year. And she started yelling at me, and I asked her to step to the side so I could get a manager involved. And she saw that as me being 100% rude and out of place. And this woman's still yelling at me as I have a line of customers. And that's very horrifying at the time. And so my manager eventually stepped in, and this is where I learned this practice. And so my manager asked me how this interaction was making me feel, and I said that I felt attacked, even though it's not my personal fault.
Yeah.
And the customer realized eventually that she was getting really frustrated because she wanted this one toy and had to have this one toy for Christmas, but it happened that we were all sold out because we only got 3 every week because it was the hot item of the year.
Yeah.
And so that experience definitely helped me moving forward, working in the hotel industry, other retail experience, and even just when I was a park ranger or an educator at Stokes, because I was able to take a step back and try thinking of another way of how the other person might have been interpreting what I was saying or what another person was saying, and try to rephrase it in a way that wasn't so aggressive, I guess, or intimidating.
Absolutely. Awesome. That's a good example. What doll was it? Do you remember?
It was the one that came in an egg.
Oh.
I'm like trying to think. You had to like care for the egg, and eventually it cracked.
Yep. We have one of those. Yeah. Not that year though. Where do you see your career going in the next 5 years? Where would you like to see your career going?
So in the next 5 years, I really want to gain my experience as an interpreter and gain a really strong leadership background, more than I have currently. And so that's why I'm really interested in this volunteer part of it, where I can take a lead role or at least assist in a lead for getting more volunteers active. And so eventually, about 20 to 30 years down the line, I would like to be a lead interpreter or even be a director of an interpretive center or nature center.
Awesome. Very cool. So if you've moved around the country for school a lot, if you were offered this job, this is a new region of the country for you, what could we do to make your transition here more successful?
I definitely think knowing the area and making friends right off the bat. So that's one thing I'm really good at at least I think I'm good at, is making friends with people I work with, even just community members. And that way I'm not just stuck at home by myself with nothing to do. I like to really immerse myself in the community. And I find it really interesting, all the history that's involved near and around Eisenhower State Park, where you had the President Eisenhower was born in this area. You have all of the water recreation. You have the ATV recreation, the bike recreation. Love to get involved in biking. Never been my thing, but I want to try it. But it's also a whole new area for me to learn. I love feeding off other people's energy, and every place I've moved to so far has been so different that I've definitely gained a respect for different cultures and different areas and in the U.S. in general.
Awesome, great. And then do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, so how did you get involved in this?
Well, that's a long story that I'm probably not going to elaborate on for this interview. Do you have any other questions for us?
One thing I was wondering is approximately how many applicants do you have for this position?
We had 50 applicants.
50
for
applicants.
this
Okay.
position.
And how many people are you hiring for?
We're hiring 2 out of the 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Any other questions?
I think that's it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. For your information, for our next steps, we'll be narrowing the pool. We had obviously more than 2 candidates that we were interviewing this time period, and so we'll be narrowing the pool. But we'll be in touch in the next couple of days.
All right. Sweet.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't have